Hey, what's up, everybody? The Black Lives Matter protests against police brutality are still happening. Don't let anyone convince you that it's all over because a few cities ended up saying yes to a couple of reforms. And as we're seeing some people go home and feel like the work is done and others still stay in the fight, I believe we're starting to see a difference between the liberals who are protesting and the leftists who are protesting. It's a very important distinction. And I'm not trying to be gatekeepy here. I'm trying to be technical. I'm not saying liberals need to go home. I'm saying we're seeing liberals start to go home. The liberal approach to these issues is to try to make just tiny little changes within the system of capitalism, because at the end of the day, liberals will always support capitalism because that's what it means to be a liberal, technically, to support capitalism. A liberal can be very progressive and really fight for a lot of social justice issues, but every single solution will be within capitalism, and mostly through electoral politics. Leftists are anti-capitalists and see the root cause for all injustice is capitalism. And when it comes to the issue of racism, it sees that capitalism enables the ruling class to keep people of color subjugated through racist policies and generations of systemic racism. And it's interesting because both liberals and leftists are talking about systemic racism, but it seems like leftists are able to be fully honest and say that the system, when we say systemic racism, is capitalism. I don't know what liberals are referring to when they say systemic racism. Often when liberals talk about changing the system, they really mean just getting diverse people in these positions of power instead of changing the power structures. And I'm also seeing several good-hearted, well-intentioned liberals seem to approach this whole conversation by only talking about individual, interpersonal racism. Posting like anti-racist reading lists where every book is just about self-interrogation about your innate biases and trying to be a better person when it comes to interpersonal racism. Or we saw that video from these celebrities saying, "I take responsibility," and they start listing all the times where they felt like they weren't good when it came to interpersonal racism.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
Every not so funny joke.
I will no longer allow racist, hurtful words, jokes, stereotypes, no matter how big or small, to be uttered in my presence.
I will not turn a blind eye.
Man, that video really pissed me off because it's like, you as individuals cannot take responsibility for institutional racism, because that's what the conversation is actually about that we're trying to have. Kwame Ture was a prominent figure in the Black Panther Party and a prominent figure in the fight against racism in America in general, and he did a great job at writing about the differences between individual racism and institutional racism. And I'm going to leave a link to the full article of this in the description, but in there he says, "When unidentified white terrorists bomb a black church and kill 5 black children, that is an act of individual racism, widely deplored by most segments of the world. But when in the same city, Birmingham, Alabama, not 5, but 500 black babies die each year because of lack of proper food, shelter, and medical facilities, and thousands more are destroyed and maimed physically, emotionally, and intellectually because of conditions of poverty and discrimination in the black community, that is a function of institutionalized racism." So you could do all this work of challenging your inner interpersonal racist biases and even get all of your friend group to do it too. And you're all doing so good at not being so interpersonally racist. And yet institutional racism is still in place. And that is actually what we're trying to fight against here. It seems like the liberal response to racism is to call everyone to turn inward and then jump into an eternal abyss of inwardness for the endless self-interrogation of your interpersonal racism and biases. And it seems like the theory behind that is that if we can get every human being to commit to doing that work, then that will end racism. And yet, meanwhile, the racist systems of power are still in place and still need to be dismantled. Liberals may say they want to dismantle unjust systems too, but their strategy always seems to look like getting every single individual to change their heart so we can all together harmoniously change the system without any pushback from anyone. And it seems like the leftist strategy looks more like getting just enough people with changed hearts to be able to handle the pushback that we will inevitably get from everyone as we try to dismantle unjust systems. And we are also aware that a lot of that individual change will occur along the way as we're actively trying to make change and recruiting people along the way. And there's an awareness that ultimately hearts will change by changing the system and not the other way around. Because interpersonal racism exists to justify the institutional racism that is already there. It's not the other way around. People often think that institutional racism is in place because of heart prejudices. It's the other way around. Also, another important distinction is that the liberal tends to seek justice through campaigns that ultimately give more power to the capitalist state in order to enact major changes on behalf of the people, while the leftist seeks justice through campaigns that ultimately take power away from the capitalist state so that that power will ultimately function in the hands of the people. That's also the major difference between the 8 Can't Wait campaign and the 8 to Abolition campaign. So I'm saying racism isn't a heart issue. And that's what I see a lot of Christians saying right now too. That's what we need to do. We just need to pray and get people to love each other no matter the color of their skin. Or the popular phrase we hear from people like this, racism is a sin issue, not a skin issue. It's like, yeah, it is a sin issue, but you need to understand the existence of institutional sin. We cannot wait to change hearts in order to change our material reality. And it is actually through changing our material reality that hearts have room to change. When it came to slavery, we couldn't wait for hearts to change on that. There were revolts, violent revolts, and a whole war. When it came to segregation, we couldn't wait for hearts to change on that. The civil rights movement had to actively fight against that unjust system. Also, the slavery that the Israelites experienced when they cried out to God for their liberation wasn't a heart issue that could be solved through waiting until the Egyptians changed their hearts. I'm reminded of when Martin Luther King Jr. talked about the white moderate in his letter in the Birmingham jail, and a lot of people have been reminded of that quote during this time. And he said, "I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I've almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action.'" Aren't we seeing so many Facebook posts that say that exact thing right now today? And yet so many of them are saying, you should just be like MLK. He was nonviolent and he didn't cause a ruckus. Yeah, the people who say that today about MLK would have been the same people who threw rocks at MLK's head in the 60s. Anyway, let's continue. Who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom. Who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. We can't put a timetable on people's liberation. That is why we're seeing people still protesting while others are going home. Because we have people saying we can't just wait, we need radical change because we can't breathe. And I want to end this video by reading something from James Cohen's book, Black Theology and Black Power. James Cohen is also the founder of Black Liberation Theology in the United States. So this is a great person to be reading right now. And he also talks about the white liberal. He says the liberal is the one who sees both sides of the issue and shies away from extremism in any form. He wants to change the heart of the racist without ceasing to be his friend. He wants progress without conflict. Therefore, when he sees blacks engaging in civil disobedience and demanding freedom now, he is disturbed. Black people know who the enemy is, and they are forcing the liberal to take sides. But the liberal wants to be a friend, that is, enjoy the rights and privileges pertaining to whiteness, and also work for the Negro. He wants change without risk, victory without blood. The liberal white man is a strange creature. He verbalizes the right things. He intellectualizes on the racial problems beautifully. He roundly denounces racists, conservatives, and the moderately liberal. Sometimes, in rare moments and behind closed doors, he will even defend Rap Brown or Stokely Carmichael. Or he may go so far as to make the statement, "I will let my daughter marry one." And this is supposed to be the absolute evidence that he is raceless. His favorite question when backed against the wall is, "What can I do?" One is tempted to reply, as Malcolm X did to the white girl who asked the same question, "Nothing." But the liberal really means this: what can I do and still receive the same privileges as other whites and, this is the key, be liked by Negroes? Indeed, the only answer is nothing. However, there are places in the black power for radicals, that is, for men, white or black, who are prepared to risk life for freedom. There are places for the John Browns, men who hate evil and refuse to tolerate it anywhere. Those are the kinds of people we need in these protests right now. Because there is way too much that needs to be changed to just be fighting for little reforms and just be talking about interpersonal individual racism. Yes, hearts need to change, but how do we change those hearts? By dismantling unjust systems that enable people to be interpersonally racist in order to justify racist systems of power. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe. Also follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/whoisdamon, where we can talk all about this stuff in a more free-form and interactive way. And if you'd like to support me, I'd greatly appreciate it. You could support me at patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Shout out to all my patrons already over there. Balaj Vin Seidel, Blessed Are the Poor, Stephen Harp, Jan Shinsu Lipona, Alex Albatross, Angela Mamel, The Kami Christian, David, James Finlay, Julianne King, Keegan James, Kristen Mouse, Marina Black, Mimi McGann, New Transcendentalist Onion, Peter A., Peter John Blake, Refined Your Scene, Sam Osakwe, and everyone else. Appreciate the support. Stay safe out there, everybody. Black Lives Matter. Keep exploring if you're out there learning right now, and keep fighting. See you later.